I just smiled. That was all I did when my daughter told me she'd already found a buyer for my house. 3 weeks after burying my wife, my own child stood in my kitchen and informed me I'd be moving into a facility by the end of the month. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the morning at a bank 2 counties over, holding a key to a life she never imagined I had. She wasn't getting a single dollar of it. Before I go any further, let me know where you're watching from tonight, friend. And if you've ever had someone underestimate you after a loss, hit that like button and subscribe, because this one's for you. My name is Walter. I'm 68 years old, and for 31 years I worked as a machinist at a steel fabrication plant outside Pittsburgh. I wasn't a rich man by the standards of the people my daughter runs with now, but I was a steady one. I showed up. I put in my hours. I brought my paycheck home, and I never once made my wife Eleanor worry about whether the lights would stay on. We were married for 39 years. We bought a modest brick house on Cardinal Lane back when I was 26 and she was 23, and we never left it. We raised one daughter there, Danielle, and we gave her everything we could scrape together: piano lessons, a used car for her 16th birthday, a paid-in-full degree from Penn State that took me 11 years of overtime shifts to cover. We weren't the kind of parents who talked about sacrifice. We just made it, quietly, and figured she'd understand someday what it cost us. 4 weeks ago, Eleanor died. It was ovarian cancer, and it took her fast, faster than any of the doctors expected, faster than I was prepared for, even though I told myself for months that I was preparing. One day she was in the garden arguing with the rabbits over her tomatoes, and 6 weeks later I was standing at a graveside in the rain, holding an umbrella over a folding chair that nobody sat in because everybody wanted to stand near the casket instead. Danielle flew in from Charlotte with her husband, Marcus, and they stayed 4 days. Long enough for the funeral, long enough for the casseroles from the neighbors to stop arriving, and then they went home and left me in a house that suddenly had too many rooms and not nearly enough sound in it. I spent my days doing the things you do when you don't know what else to do. I organized her closet 3 times. I found her handwriting on grocery lists stuck to the refrigerator and couldn't bring myself to throw them away. I sat in her reading chair by the window because it still smelled like her lavender lotion. And some mornings that was the only reason I got out of bed at all, to go sit in a chair and breathe in what was left of her. Then, 11 days ago, I got a phone call from a woman named Patricia Vance. She said she was an estate attorney, and she needed me to come into her office in Wexford regarding a matter tied to my late wife. I told her she must have the wrong Eleanor Hensley. Eleanor and I did everything together. Every account, every bill, every decision. Sitting at that same kitchen table every single Sunday night for 39 years, going over the numbers like clockwork. There were no secrets between us. There couldn't have been. But I put on my one good sport coat, the navy one I'd worn to Danielle's wedding, and I drove the 40 minutes into Wexford anyway. Patricia Vance's office was small and warm, with law books stacked to the ceiling, and she greeted me with a kind of gentleness that made my stomach tighten before she even said a word. She told me that 18 years ago, Eleanor had come to her, alone, and set up a private trust. She handed me a folder and a single brass key, and told me the key opened a safe deposit box at a credit union 2 blocks away, one I had never in my life set foot inside. I sat in my truck outside that credit union for almost 10 minutes before I could make myself go in. Eleanor and I had never had a secret. Not one. So why did some part of me already know that this one was going to change everything? The box was heavier than I expected. Inside, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a stack of documents an inch thick, and beneath them, bound in rubber bands, more cash than I had ever seen in one place in my life, $310,000, in neat stacks of hundreds. My hands actually shook holding it, but underneath the money was a deed and a letter, and the letter was in Eleanor's handwriting, the same careful cursive she used to write my name on birthday cards for 4 decades. She explained everything. Her mother, my mother-in-law, a woman I'd only met twice before she passed when Danielle was small, had come from old timber money in northern Michigan, land that had been in the family for 4 generations along the shore of a place called Beaver Lake. Eleanor's mother had cut ties with most of that family over a bitter inheritance dispute decades earlier, but she'd never sold her own piece of it. 160 acres of shoreline and forest that had sat quiet and untouched, generating a modest but steady income from a timber lease that Eleanor had managed privately, in cash, for going on 20 years. Eleanor wrote that she never told me, and never told Danielle, because she'd watched what money did to her own family growing up, watched cousins stop speaking to each other over acreage, watched greed dress itself up as love. She wanted Danielle to build her own life the way we built ours, brick by brick, without ever wondering if her worth was tied to a number in a bank account. She wanted our marriage built on something sturdier than money. She'd been planning, she wrote, to tell me everything on our 40th anniversary next spring. We would have made it. We were 4 months short. I sat in that quiet little vault room and I cried harder than I had at the funeral, because for the first time since she died, it felt like Eleanor was still trying to take care of me. I drove home, turning it all over in my mind. $310,000 and 160 acres of lakefront property generating income I hadn't even known existed. I thought about Danielle and Marcus, and how she'd mentioned more than once over the phone how tight things had gotten since Marcus lost his sales job last year. I thought about how I could pay off whatever they owed. I thought about setting something aside for the grandchildren we didn't have yet but that Danielle talked about wanting someday. For the first time in a month, driving down our street with the deed and the letter sitting in a folder on the passenger seat, I felt something that wasn't just grief. I felt purpose. That feeling lasted exactly as long as it took me to turn into my own driveway. There was a moving truck backed halfway up onto the lawn, tire tracks cut deep into the grass Eleanor had babied for 15 years. The front door of our house stood wide open. My stomach dropped straight through the floor of the truck before I'd even parked. I got out slowly, holding my folder against my chest like it might protect me from whatever I was about to walk into, and I stepped through my own front door into chaos. 2 men I'd never seen in my life were wrapping Eleanor's china cabinet, the one her grandmother had given her, the one she'd polished every Sunday for as long as I'd known her in thick, quilted moving blankets. Another man was disassembling my recliner, the one with the worn left armrest where I'd rested my elbow every evening for 11 years. Boxes lined the hallway, taped shut, with my handwriting nowhere on them because I hadn't packed a single one. And standing in the middle of my living room, clipboard in hand, directing the whole operation like she owned the deed to the place, was my daughter. Marcus stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed, not meeting my eyes. "Danielle," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "What exactly is happening in my house right now?" She turned, and for just a flicker of a second I saw something flash across her face, not guilt, exactly, more like the look of someone who'd rehearsed this moment and was annoyed it was starting a little earlier than planned. Then it smoothed over into something gentle, something practiced. "Dad, we didn't think you'd be back from your appointment this soon." Her voice had that careful therapy session softness people use when they've decided you're fragile. "We were going to have this mostly done before you got home, so it wouldn't be so hard on you." "So hard on me," I repeated. "You're taking apart my house without telling me a single word about it." Marcus stepped forward then, and he had the decency at least to look uncomfortable. "Walter, we should all sit down and talk about this calmly." "I am calm," I said, though my pulse was hammering in my ears. "I would like someone to explain why there are strangers wrapping up my wife's china." Danielle set the clipboard down on the arm of the couch, my couch, and crossed the room toward me with the kind of measured, gentle steps you'd use approaching a spooked animal. "Dad, we need to be honest with each other. You're 68 years old. You're alone, in a 4-bedroom house you can barely keep up with. Since Mom passed, you haven't been yourself. We're worried sick about you." "I've been grieving," I said. "That's not the same thing as falling apart." She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy trifold brochure and held it toward me the way you'd hand someone a diagnosis. The cover showed elderly residents seated around a table doing a puzzle, all of them smiling in that particular way that only exists in brochure photography. Across the top it read Golden Pines Senior Living Community. I'd driven past that place before. It wasn't golden and it wasn't anything close to a pine forest. It was a low state-subsidized facility on Route 19, with a parking lot full of potholes. "We've already put down a deposit," Danielle said. "Dad, we've decided this is what's best. We're selling the house. It's too much for you, and honestly it's too much for us to manage from Charlotte, worrying about you every single day." I looked at my daughter, this woman I had rocked to sleep more nights than I could count, this woman whose scraped knees I had bandaged, and whose algebra homework I had struggled through with her at this same kitchen table, and for one soft, foolish moment, something in me wanted to forgive her instantly. I wondered if Marcus's job loss had put them further underwater than Danielle had ever let on. I wondered if this ugly, clumsy plan was born out of real desperation rather than real cruelty. I had $310,000 sitting in a folder against my chest. I could fix whatever hole they dug themselves into. I could tell them right then about the letter, about Eleanor's trust, about the lake property, and watch all of this fear evaporate off both their faces in an instant. I actually opened my mouth to do it, but my eyes drifted past Danielle's shoulder, down to the coffee table, where a stack of papers sat half covered by a manila folder. The top page was visible enough to read the bold header across it. Durable power of attorney. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. I stepped past my daughter and picked it up before she could stop me, my eyes scanning line after line of dense legal language granting full and unconditional control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my property, to one Danielle Hensley Ford. And there, at the bottom of the page, next to a raised notary seal, was my signature. A signature I had never made in my life. The warmth I'd felt toward her a moment earlier drained out of me so fast it left me lightheaded. This wasn't a family trying, clumsily, to help. This was fraud. This was a forged legal document meant to strip me of every right I had, sitting in plain sight on my own coffee table like they hadn't even bothered to hide it well, because they never expected me home in time to see it. I looked up at Danielle. The gentle, worried expression was gone. In its place was something colder, something calculating, watching me realize exactly what I was holding. "Dad," she started. I didn't let her finish. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. 31 years on a factory floor teaches you something about how to survive a dangerous situation. You do not react on instinct when instinct will get you hurt. You slow everything down. You assess. You wait for your opening. I had spent decades watching men get their hands crushed because they moved too fast in a moment that called for patience. I let my shoulders drop. I let my hands start to shake, genuinely shake, because it already was, and I let my voice crack when I spoke again. "I don't remember signing this," I said softly, letting my eyes go a little unfocused, a little lost. "I don't remember any of this, Danielle." The change in the room was immediate. Marcus glanced nervously at Danielle, and Danielle recovered so fast it should have terrified me on its own. Her whole posture softened. Her voice dropped into something warm and sympathetic, and she crossed to me and gently took my arm, steering me toward the couch as if I might collapse. "Dad, sit down. We didn't want you to find out this way." She knelt in front of me, her eyes swimming with an emotion I now understood was entirely manufactured. "You have to understand, Dr. Ferris called us. After Mom's last week in the hospital, he told Marcus he was concerned about your mental state, about how you were coping. He said grief like this, at your age, can accelerate things, cognitive things." "I'm not losing my mind," I said, and I let my voice waver just enough. "I feel fine." "You left the stove on twice last week," Marcus said, stepping in now, his voice gaining confidence. "Danielle found the back door open at 2 in the morning. You've been talking to Mom's photo like she can hear you." None of it was true, not one word. I had never left a burner running in my life. 31 years around industrial machinery does that to a man. But I said nothing. I let my chin drop. I let my hands tremble in my lap, and I whispered, "I don't remember any of that happening." "We know you don't, Dad," Danielle said, squeezing my hand. "That's exactly why we had to step in." I looked back down at the forged document, still sitting on my knee. "But this signature," Danielle exhaled, and for the first time that whole afternoon, something like true discomfort passed over her face. Not guilt over what she was doing to me. I understood later, but irritation at having to explain it out loud. "We had it done so you wouldn't have to deal with the paperwork stress. We're doing this to protect you, Dad. The house sale closes in 9 days. You'll love Golden Pines. They have activities every afternoon." I sat there and absorbed the confession like a blow to the chest, and I understood something in that moment with total clarity. If I fought them here, right now, with nothing but my own word against a notarized document and a fabricated medical concern, I would lose. They would call it exactly what they wanted it to look like: an unstable, grieving old man lashing out, refusing help, becoming combative. They had built the entire narrative in advance. All I would do by resisting was walk directly into the trap they'd already set. So I did the only thing that gave me any chance at all. I became smaller. I let my shoulders curl forward. I nodded slowly, like a man finally accepting defeat. "Maybe you're right," I mumbled. "I am so tired, Danielle. I don't know what's real anymore." "You just need to rest, Dad," she said, patting my hand like I was a child. "Go lie down. We'll finish up out here. I shuffled down the hallway to my bedroom, dragging my feet the way a broken man would, and I did not let my spine straighten again until the door clicked shut behind me. Then I stood very still in the dark of my own bedroom, breathing hard, and I hid the folder with Eleanor's letter and the deed to the lake property in the one place I knew Danielle would never think to look, inside the false bottom of my old army footlocker. Still packed with things from a war she'd never once asked me about, I sat on the edge of my bed that whole evening, listening to strangers dismantle 39 years of my life through the wall, piece by piece, and I turned the same question over and over in my mind. If Danielle was willing to forge a legal document and fabricate a diagnosis, what exactly had driven her to it? People don't commit felonies over a little bit of tight money. People do it when they're drowning. I didn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I got up quietly for a glass of water, and through the kitchen window I saw Marcus standing out on the back patio in the cold, pacing, phone pressed hard against his ear, his free hand raking through his hair. I couldn't make out most of what he was saying, but I heard 3 words clearly enough to make my blood run cold. Before he finds out. Before I find out what? Over the next several days, I played the part they needed me to play. I let them believe the frail old man routine had worked completely. I ate what they put in front of me and left half of it untouched. I let Danielle help me get dressed some mornings, even though my hands worked just fine. I nodded along vacantly whenever they talked about Golden Pines like it was a resort. And every night, when the house went quiet, I got to work. I still had friends from the plant men I'd worked alongside for 3 decades, men who trusted me and who I trusted right back. One of them, Gary Pulaski, had a son-in-law who did IT security work, and I asked him, carefully, quietly, whether it was possible to find out if somebody had opened new accounts or lines of credit using my name. It took 4 days, but what came back turned my stomach. Marcus had opened 2 credit lines in my name 8 months earlier, totaling almost $90,000, and both were maxed out. There was also a private loan, taken against equity he claimed to have in a house he didn't own, my house, from a lender that Gary's son-in-law flagged immediately as predatory, the kind that doesn't send politely worded collection letters when payments stop coming. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate, and they were drowning. And somewhere in that drowning they had decided that committing fraud against a grieving old man was easier than admitting failure to their family. I also learned, through a neighbor who still spoke to me honestly, that Danielle had been telling people around the cul-de-sac for weeks that I was declining rapidly, laying groundwork, building witnesses for a story she hadn't even needed to tell me directly, because she was planning to tell it to a judge, or a doctor, or anyone else who might one day ask questions about where my house and my money had gone. The house sale was scheduled to close on a Thursday. Danielle had already lined up a real estate closing at an office downtown, using the forged power of attorney to sign on my behalf, without me even needing to be present, which told me she intended for me to already be checked into Golden Pines, quietly out of the way, before the ink dried. I called Patricia Vance 3 days before the closing. I brought her everything: the forged document, the record of Marcus's credit lines, the neighbor's account of Danielle's stories, and a recording Gary had helped me make of Marcus on that back patio, admitting on a call to a collections agent that they intended to liquidate the old man's house to cover what they owed. Patricia listened to all of it without saying a word, and when I finished, she looked at me and said quietly, "Walter, this isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is criminal fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse, and we have enough here to stop it cold." The closing was scheduled for 10 in the morning at a title company downtown. I walked in at 9:55, in the same navy sport coat, with Patricia Vance beside me, and a folder of my own. Danielle was already seated at the conference table with the forged power of attorney spread out in front of her, mid-sentence explaining to the title agent that her father was unable to attend due to health concerns. She looked up when the door opened, and every ounce of blood drained out of her face. "Dad, I'm here to stop this sale," I said, and my voice did not shake at all this time. "And I think you both know exactly why." Marcus half rose from his chair like he might bolt for the door. He didn't get the chance. Patricia had already made 2 calls that morning, one to the county district attorney's elder abuse unit, and one to the detective who'd been quietly building a file since the moment Gary's evidence landed on her desk. 2 officers stepped through the office door less than a minute later. I watched my daughter's face collapse in real time, the practiced softness gone, nothing underneath it but panic. "You forged my signature," I said to her quietly. while the officer read Marcus his rights a few feet away. You told people I was losing my mind. You were going to lock me away in a facility and sell the house out from under me before I even knew what was happening. Dad, please. Danielle's voice cracked, real tears now, though I couldn't tell anymore if they were for me or for herself. We were desperate. We didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me, I said. I would have helped you. I've spent my whole life helping you. All you had to do was tell the truth. She didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. The office receptionist stood frozen behind her desk as the officers walked Danielle and Marcus out through the lobby in handcuffs, past a row of stunned strangers waiting for their own closings. My daughters composed, put together life unraveling in front of people who would go home and tell this story at their own dinner tables that night. I didn't feel triumphant watching it. I felt hollowed out, the way you do when something has to end badly because it was always going to end badly, and there was nothing left to do but let it. Patricia walked with me out to the parking lot afterward, and she put a hand on my shoulder before I got in my truck. You did the right thing, Walter. Not the easy thing. The right thing. The legal process moved faster than I expected. With the forged document, the fraudulent credit lines, and the recorded confession, the district attorney's office didn't need much convincing. Danielle pled guilty to forgery and financial exploitation of an elder rather than risk a trial, and received 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. Marcus took a similar deal on separate fraud charges tied to the credit lines. I have not spoken to either of them since the day in that office, though Patricia tells me Danielle has written me 2 letters from the facility where she's serving her sentence. I haven't opened them yet. Some days I think I might. Someday. Other days I'm not sure there's anything left to say that would matter. I sold the Cardinal Lane house 4 months later, but not to a stranger, and not for a profit. I donated it, through Patricia, to a regional nonprofit that provides emergency housing and legal advocacy for elderly victims of financial abuse, people going through exactly what I almost went through, people who don't always have a Gary Pulaski or a Patricia Vance in their corner. The house where movers once tried to haul away my wife's china now has a full-time caseworker living on site and 2 guest rooms for elderly clients who have nowhere else to go while their cases are sorted out. Eleanor spent her whole life quietly taking care of people. It felt right that her home would keep doing that, even now. As for the lake property in Michigan, I moved up there in the fall. The cabin needed work, more work than I expected. But there's something about fixing things with your own hands that puts a person back together in ways nothing else quite manages. I hired a small local crew to keep managing the timber lease, and I split the income 3 ways now. A third goes to routine costs, a third goes into a fund. Patricia helped me set up in Eleanor's name for elder abuse, legal aid, and a third I've simply set aside, for no one in particular yet. Though some mornings I think about the grandchildren Danielle and I will probably never get the chance to know together. And I wonder if maybe, someday, that third might find its way to them anyway. Forgiveness is a strange, slow thing. I'm not there yet, but I'm not sure I've closed the door on it completely either. I sit out on the porch most evenings now, looking out over the water while the sun goes down behind the tree line. And some nights I swear I can still smell lavender on the breeze coming off the lake, though there isn't a lavender bush for 100 miles in any direction. I think Eleanor would tell me I did right by her. I think she'd tell me that money was never the thing she was protecting all those years. It was us. Whatever us was supposed to mean once she was gone. I think she'd tell me that the people who are supposed to love you the most can sometimes be the ones who hurt you the deepest, and that doesn't make you foolish for having loved them. It just makes you human. If there's one thing I'd want anybody watching this to carry with them, it's this. Don't mistake silence for weakness, in yourself or in the people who raised you. The quietest people in a room are very often the ones paying the closest attention. Protect what you've built. Trust what your gut tells you, even when your heart is begging you to explain it away. And never, ever let grief make you an easy target for the people who are counting on you being too broken to notice. If Walter's story moved you tonight, hit that subscribe button and tell me down in the comments where are you watching from and what would you have done in his shoes. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next story, friend.